All right, it's James, and I'm back here with Barrington Miller, and we're pleased to be joined by our friend south of the border, Mr. Jason Paltrowitz, who's with a company called OTC Markets. He's one of the big bosses there. And this is a segment on After Hours on Aftermarket that we want to, premise as Meanwhile in America. And we've mentioned the U.S. a few times on our program, but who better to talk to than someone who is at the heart of it all in Manhattan, Mr. Jason Paltrowitz. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great to see you. It's been a while.
It's been too long.
I miss seeing you live and in person.
But first and foremost, the last time we talked, I think it was on Instagram, on our channel CSC TV. I will link it above. And the reason why I want people to maybe go back and watch that after this interview is just to juxtapose where things have come in a matter of, I guess, 4 months. I've lost track of time, but basically it was 3 or 4 weeks after the pandemic really caused the shutdown, and you guys in New York were in the middle of it. It was tough, and you were up in your apartment, and I'm not going to provide specific address, but somewhere in the Upper West Side. Am I in the right part of
vicinity? Yeah,
of the township of Manhattan?
Mm-hmm.
So back then, you were hanging tough. I didn't see any sort of Instagram post from you saying you left and pulled a Snake Plissken and escaped New York City. You've been New York strong, but just walk us through quickly, like, what have the last few months been like for you in New York?
So yes, I am New York strong. I did not up and leave. I didn't buy a house somewhere, and I'm looking because I'm looking out the window here. Yeah, it's been interesting, right? We went through the worst, and interestingly enough, I think now we're probably in the best position if you look at where we are vis-a-vis the rest of the country. I'm a born and raised New Yorker, and in fact, born and raised Upper West Sider. So I have seen New York City. I'm a product of the 80s. I went to public school during crack is whack and all that other stuff. So New York has been a lot worse than it is now. And so, I am New York strong, and I'm going to stay. Things are opening up. Next week, I'm going to start going back into the office again. The infection rates are way down. The death rates are way down. There's more and more people out in the street. Restaurants will start opening up. The Met, for those of you that are into art museums, the Met is opening up. So I think we're slowly coming out the back end of it. This is a resilient city. It's seen, its share of tragedy, whether it's 9/11 or the Great Depression or almost going bankrupt in the 70s, and it'll bounce back. But I'm staying.
Jay, I got a question. Let's, if you don't mind. Sorry, James, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, this is your show too.
That's how's work? Like how are the OTC markets? Have you guys stopped, slowed down, picked up? Are you busier? What's going on?
We just shut down.
It's done. It's over.
Yeah.
See ya.
You're in the
towel. We've become an MSO. Actually, we're probably like you guys, right? We hit a little bit of a lull with some activity slowdown in the March, April point of view. If you think about new listings, companies coming to market, we've come out of that gangbusters. We spent a lot of that time building pipeline, reaching out to clients and prospects, realizing that people weren't going to necessarily make a move to join OTC markets, QX or QB. But all that work in the lull has paid off, right? We've got more applications in process, more companies coming to market. August, interestingly enough, for new companies joining our markets was the best month ever, or not ever, the best month we've had this year. And August is historically the worst month of the year. So I think we're seeing that bounce back on the companies joining our market. On the trading side, you guys are seeing it as well. Just volumes are up and up and up and up. Billions of shares a day trading just on our market.
Is that thank you to Robinhood?
I think it's a little bit thank you to Robinhood. It's probably a lot thank you to just general retail activity, which obviously Robinhood is a part, but we're seeing it across all of the retail brokerage platforms, whether it's the E-Trades or the TD Ameritrades or anybody. You're just seeing volumes consistently kind of stay high. So that's good for our trading business. And then, of course, on the market data side, all that feeds into a desire to see more data. So our indices are, like yours are going up. Companies coming to market are going up. And, I'm sure like you, we're riding the wave of some very specific industries that are seeing the benefit,
Yeah.
not the least of which, from a Canadian perspective, is the resource sector.
Yeah. I want to, and then I want to talk about,
Go ahead.
and I want to drill into that, Jason. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you've provided me an opportunity to segue into something I really want to pick your brain on. So you're talking about thematic things that are happening in the market that have improved our business conditions, actually more so than I think we would have predicted back in March. But we are also seeing some signals in the market that cause possibly some concern. And we talked to Richard Carlton about this last week, which was sort of this rally that's happening mostly in the US, but Shopify is a big contributor to this as well here in Canada around the, what I would pull out as a headline. I'll share a headline when we post this, but stock markets are at tech bubble valuation levels. So with all these people piling into the market and people specifically looking at these tech stocks, do you have any concern that this is not meant to last?
I think there are a lot of underlying concerns in the market, not the least of which that I think the stock market economy has kind of divorced itself from the real economy. And there's a lot of stuff going on in this market, and I think I actually watched Richard, and I agree with him. If you look at the stock market, what people view as the stock market, right? They look at 2 or 3 indices down here. We look at the NASDAQ, we look at the S&P, and we look at the Dow. If you look at the long tail of stocks in the S&P 500, those companies are not doing well. You're really limiting it to some very large tech stocks, whether it's Amazon or Netflix or Apple. And once you take those out of the equation, you're looking at a lot of companies and a lot of industries that are just kind of getting by and are not performing well. And I think it's bad for the economy and it's bad for investors when we have a view that markets are doing really well when it really is 5 or 6 stocks and everything else isn't. And that goes down to not just the stock prices, but if you look at, even trading volume, if you look at price fluctuations, if you look at, it's just kind of flat. All those indicators are flat if you take out those 5 or 6 stocks. And I don't think that's healthy for anybody. I do think, look, who knows what's going to happen with this pandemic. You're starting to see spikes again in Europe, which is a little scary. France is spiking and Spain is spiking. And so you don't know what's going to happen. There certainly is a long run for an Amazon. But
Yeah.
You mix that in with a lot of free cash. There's just a ton of cash floating around. There's no better place to put it than the equity market because interest rates are so low. And so, that creates, theoretically, if you look at history, that does create all the signs for a bubble, whether that's this year, next year, or the year after. And then, we're coming out of this cycle of the pandemic. So unemployment is high. We haven't seen in the U.S. the evictions that I think are going to start happening and kind of the natural repercussions of 3 or 4 months after a pandemic. So, I can't predict the future, but there's certainly a lot of, if you look at credit card debt, if you look at automotive debt, if you look at, educational debt, there are a lot of things in the market that would kind of scare me medium to long term.
It's interesting for our audience that's been following the show. We're referencing Richard Carlton's interview from last week, and he distinctly talked about the 2 different markets, the real market and the not real market. And there's a lot of similarities. And going back even further to one of our shows when we had Trader TV .live on, the typical one signal when you're looking at charts is the longer something stays in a range, in a really, really tight range, the more likelihood there will be a violent reaction one way or the other. And to take what Jason Paltrowitz is saying, removing the fangs out from, from your evaluation, everything else is trading within a range, within a really, really tight range. So if I was a chartist and I was looking, I'd be thinking that there would be a reaction one way or the other, one direction or the other.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
We don't want to say
don't
what
forget
that
the
direction
American
is, but I think we know in the back.
the American consumer typically drives the economy. And the American consumer is hurting. So if you even keep it as simplistic as that.
So it's funny because I was going to get to that point, but and let's just dive into it. So what is it that gives anyone optimism about the American economy and U.S. capitalism? Is it the U.S. consumers always had so much buying power that they can dictate terms globally with the supply chain, with the retail power that they have to, really the buying power in general to sort of dictate terms, and they got that engine that can get started really quickly. When we saw it coming out of 2008. Is that the key variable here that gives America its power, or is there something a little more in depth to it than that?
Well, certainly the American consumer helps. We spend a lot of money. I mean, I don't need to talk more about that. That's kind of the history, and a number of things have been written about the American consumer. America's always had, for better or for worse, that innovative entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm not saying other countries don't. But what I think has always been our strong suit is our ability to adapt and adjust and find new ways and find new paths. I mean, Amazon is the best example, right? Guy starts thinking you can sell books online, and look what's happened to Amazon. America, Tesla is a good example of that. That innovative entrepreneurial spirit has always driven this economy, and I think it will continue to do so. And so in that respect, I do think this country gives people the ability to be dreamers and to see the visions of those dreams. And, now we're in a perfect economy, or in a perfect position where those dreamers can actually fund those dreams easier than ever before, which is interesting. There's so much money in the system that entrepreneurs are having a great time when it comes to funding their endeavors. And so I think that's what's, again, I don't want to be American elitist, that it separates us from Canada or anywhere else in the world, but that definitely the conditions are ripe for business and for entrepreneurs in this country. I hope that continues. There are there's a lot of political issues that hurt or hinder that, not the least of which is immigration policy. Elon Musk didn't come from the United States, and the founders of Google didn't come from the United States. And then there's tax policy. There's all sorts of political things at play that either will propel that or hinder that.
What I like about the U.S. Is that they always bet on themselves. It's the Pete Rose embodiment. Did he bet?
Wow, that's the best example you could.
No, I'm just saying I have my own opinion about that. But
I was thinking Rocky Balboa or something.
No, he just bets on they bet on themselves, and the rest of the world.
America will never be in the Country Hall of Fame.
It started. Well, we know how it started, and we have no idea where it's going, but we do know that the U.S. finds a way. And speaking of finding a way, what's going on in November in your country?
I have no idea. I wish I could, you see people that'll tell you one way or the other. You talk about, we always bet on ourselves. This might be the one time I don't put my money on the table. We're in strange times. My father used to say, you can't argue logic. I think he didn't expect 2020 or the Trump administration or this election. You certainly can argue logic. And so I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, you've got 20% of the people on either side of the equation that don't want to hear any logic, don't want to hear any facts. They're just sticking to their guns no matter what. And I think maybe 20% is being generous. And so what it really comes down to is, that sliver in the middle and which side of the equation they fall on. American elections used to come down to, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
Right.
We clearly are not. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's over double-digit unemployment. There's rioting in the streets. You can talk one way or the other who's responsible, what policies, but America is not better off than we were 4 years ago when the markets were doing great and people, unemployment was at an all-time low, and there was just this feeling of optimism. I don't sense there is a feeling of optimism the same way there was 4 years ago, 8 years ago. So I don't know what that means, because traditionally people would vote based on that. People don't seem to be thinking that way anymore. There's definitely a cult mentality, or, it's more about the person than the policy. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know either way, whatever happens, that it's going to resolve anything.
Well, this is a business after hours, after market program. What does business Jason Paltrowitz want or need?
I think business Jason Paltrowitz, and that might be personal Jason Paltrowitz too. I think we need some
Jason's all business.
We need some deep breath, right? We need some semblance of just back to normalcy, just back to the traditional ebbs and flows of, not every day needs to be a fire drill or a news cycle or something more ridiculous than the day before. I think, whatever happens in the election, you have certainty because you've got 4 years of certainty. That's just built into the system. You know what you got for 4 years. So it's not just certainty. It's got to be just like a deep breath, back to some civility, back to not everything being a fire drill, not everything being reactive. I think that's what business wants. I think that's what people want. If you get rid of television and the news, deep down, everybody kind of gets along. We all pull together. We all want to grow business. We all want to make money. We all want to support our families. We all want to be able to do the things that people in countries do. I think both business and people in general, I think they just want a deep breath and they don't want everything to be, just crazy.
Yeah, and that's kind of
we'd like to be more Canadian.
Yeah, well, we have our own problems sometimes, but it comes back to what you started we started the conversation around. I guess we'll end on this note, but I've always thought about this word community, and you mentioned New York Strong, and obviously that faith you have in your community through all this to kind of hold it together. They've got this almost like memory of as a community to know how to deal with this. And I think that's where you guys are headed. I think you'll get through it, but you got to rely on the foundational stuff that's made the country so great and the people in it so great. And most of the people, I can't speak for all of them, but it's just that community and being able to look at your neighbor and say, I trust you to help me get through this, or I trust that you're not going to do something too crazy. We're just going to get through it because there's high times, low times. And I know that's what I've looked at over the last few months is just knowing that, look, there's stability in my neighborhood. There's good people. They're all trying to do the right thing by themselves, look after their families. And then I think if that's a foundation, you can't go wrong with that. So hopefully that's, again, the ethic of that, what people get back to in America. If it's been lost, I don't know.
I hope so. I hope you're right.
Yeah.
New York, you mentioned New York. It's interesting. There's more nationalities, more languages spoken. I mean, this is the most diverse city potentially in the world in terms of numbers of people from different countries and languages. And yeah, it's got some troubles, but you also find a place where people seem to be able to coexist better than anywhere else. And we have pulled together, and people are doing the right thing. And yeah, there are outliers, and maybe crime has spiked a little, or there's some things happening that you wouldn't like. But for the most part, this city is pulled together, and you see people helping other people, and you see charity donations going as higher than they've ever been. So if there's a bright spot in all of this, it is that I've been impressed by this city, certainly, and its ability to get through it.
And Barrington will he'll agree with me that the old impression growing up as kids of New York City and crime was the movie The Warriors. So we're pretty much.
By the way, it's not far off. It's not far off. That's what I always say to people. Like, I grew up in New York in the 70s and 80s. This is a cakewalk.
Yeah, no, it's every gritty New York 70s movie is framed in my head. Like, that's
it's funny. I don't know if you guys have seen the HBO show The Deuce, but that does remind me of my early childhood. And every time I watch that, I always long for the days of Times Square from The Deuce. Maybe we're getting a little getting a little closer to that.
I kind of like Times Square the way it is, to be honest. Yeah, it's all right. Well, thank you for joining the show. I know that you may or may not live in the same building as a very famous radio announcer, so I don't want to tip anyone off as to where Jason lives, so I won't say who it is. But thank you for taking it down a couple of notches and joining us today for this podcast presentation of Aftermarket. Barrington, anything you want to say before we wish our good friend Jason Paltrowitz a fine evening?
Before all of this thing happened and before the world changed, you may or may not know, our listeners, that Jason Paltrowitz is a man of the world. He has logged more air miles than perhaps our very own Richard Carlton. And that is saying a lot. Jason, just out of curiosity,
not this year.
Where's the first place you will want to travel when everything really opens up and settles down?
Well, I do have a flight booked on October 3rd to go back to London. Whether or not that happens remains to be seen. Not if I have to quarantine for 14 days. So the real answer is I'm slated to take my first trip October 3rd. If that doesn't happen, I'd love to get up to see you guys, quite honestly. I don't have to fly 8 hours. I am a man of the world, but I've traveled extensively with you guys. And I miss those days.
Yeah.
Any word on VRIC? Are we going to be in Vancouver in January, maybe?
Vancouver, that's a whole other year away. That's another number in the calendar.
Yeah.
To be determined. No, what I hope we do is we do get to hang out and do this in person next time. Do it amongst a table with maybe a couple of beverages and just catch up. So thanks again. Thanks, Jason. We're going to wrap. I want to thank everyone for watching this evening. Again, we mentioned a lot of the great programming that we've already presented with Richard and TraderTV.live. I'll link that below. It's also been linked above during the show. And if you have any questions or comments, please please subscribe. We need your support for this program. And thankfully, Jason's going to be available to answer any questions. If Jason, you want to drop an email?
It's pretty easy. Jason@otcmarkets.com.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, well, with that, I want to wish you a great evening, Barrington. Once again, I think we survived to live another week.
I think so. I think we'll make it.
Yeah.
I think we'll make it.
Yeah, I think we'll make it. Okay, well, really appreciate it. And once again, this is James Black. That's Barrington. And this was Aftermarket. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.